In this brief video presentation, I would like to talk about a few of the research efforts that have supported and confirmed the core elements of the Reid Technique interview and interrogation process. In 2009, President Barack Obama convened the High Value Detainee Interrogation Group, HIG, which was made up of cognitive and social psychologists and other experts. One of the core responsibilities of the HIG was to study the comparative effectiveness of interrogation techniques and approaches with the goal of identifying the existing techniques that were the most effective and developing new techniques to improve intelligence interrogations. The HIG research validated the fundamental premise of the Reid technique, namely, always treat the subject with understanding and empathy. The HIG released their findings in a special issue of Applied Cognitive Psychology, and the research concluded that coming across as empathetic causes interrogation targets to open up more. This is consistent with the recommendations we have been making for decades, specifically, and I'm going to quote now from our Criminal Interrogation Confessions 5th edition book, treat the suspect with decency and respect regardless of the nature of the offense. No matter how revolting or horrible a crime may be, such as a sexually motivated brutal killing of a small child, the suspect should not be treated or referred to as a despicable, inhumane individual. A sympathetic, understanding attitude and interrogation approach is far more effective, and that's exactly what HIG determined. Many of the other findings that the HIG research group found confirm the Reid technique process as well. For example, one of their conclusions was that the investigator should, quote, tell your target a story about what he or she did, leading the person to believe that you already know what happened. This is exactly what we teach to do in theme development. Specifically, the focus of developing the theme is describing the suspect's behavior in such a light as to give them reasons and motives for psychologically justifying what they did. Not legally, but psychologically, reinforcing the guilty suspect's own rationalizations and justifications for committing the crime. Japan research. In the Reid technique of interviewing and interrogation, we've always espoused a non-judgmental, neutral, objective demeanor for the investigator during the interview and an empathetic, understanding approach during the interrogation. Always building rapport with the suspect and letting the suspect know that we are aware of the fact that almost anyone under similar circumstances might have done the same thing. The Japanese research confirmed that building relationship with the suspect, quote, gets the best results, quote, and minimizes the chances of a false confession. A study published in Human Communication Research by researchers at Korea University, Michigan State University, and Texas State University found that using active questioning techniques, including the Reid technique interview process, of individuals yielded almost a near-perfect result of 97.8 accuracy in detecting deception. The authors pointed out that previous studies with experts usually used passive deception detection processes where they just simply watched videotapes and tried to assess a person's credibility without any live interaction with the subject. In those few studies where there was some interaction between the subject and the investigator, they were typically following a script that was prepared for them by the researchers. Generally speaking, those kinds of studies came up with the result of only 50% accuracy. So what this current research is pointing out is the more interaction you can have with the subject, the more accurate you can be in the assessment of their credibility. Spanish research. A Spanish study involving 85 University of Spain students demonstrated that individuals who received training on how to evaluate the subject's responses to Reid behavior-provoking interview questions achieved a 97.9% accuracy rate in identifying the subject's credibility. Research conducted by Texas State University and Michigan State University confirms that detection of deception substantially increases in accuracy when the interview and content of the interview is viewed in context. In this particular research project, the authors reported on 10 studies they had conducted regarding the investigator's ability to detect deception when the interview was placed in context, namely, the investigator knew the case facts and evidence and how the subject fit into the scheme of things. When the judges or evaluators were asked to make deception judgments with some meaningful contextual information, they performed significantly better than chance. In the Reid technique, we teach there are several basic principles and rules that need to be followed in order to evaluate accurately a subject's verbal and nonverbal behavior symptoms, including always establish a subject's normal behavioral pattern and then look for changes from that norm or baseline. Read all nonverbal behavior for timing and consistency. Read behavioral clusters, the overall behavior, not just one thing a person does or says. And always evaluate behavior symptoms in context and in conjunction with the case facts and evidence. So one of the researchers from this study pointed out that clearly the high accuracy rates we achieve is based on the fact that a subject's behavior should never be evaluated as a single determining factor, but always in context, always in conjunction with the case facts and evidence, something that we've been teaching for decades. Newfoundland research confirms the Reid behavioral analysis interview structure and the use of open-ended questions. In our book, Criminal Interrogation and Confessions, we devote a chapter to the topic of interview questions and the importance of asking open-ended questions in the investigative interview. We address such topics as asking an initial open-ended question, phrasing open-ended questions, eliciting a complete response, evaluating the response to an open-ended question, clarifying the open account, asking direct questions, and asking follow-up questions. In a study conducted by the staff from the Psychology Department of Memorial University of Newfoundland, their results concluded in part that officers interviewing witnesses are potentially reducing the amount of information retrieved by talking too much, asking too many closed-ended questions, and failing to adhere to science-based methods of mining memory. The authors recommend that between 20 and 30% of all questions during the interview should be open-ended, which we concur with. For additional information on research concerning the Reid technique or aspects of the Reid technique, please review our website at reid.com and our book, Criminal Interrogation and Confessions. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes to view this video presentation.